Now, complex fractions are kind of complicated and hard to work with. So the first thing that we're going to want to do when we're confronted with one is typically going to be to simplify it. And how do we simplify it? Well, remember, in the last video, we said how we were going to understand a complex fraction. We said we were going to understand 2.5 over 5 1/3 as a division problem. 2.5 divided by 5 1/3, which gives us an obvious way to simplify this complex fraction. To simplify the complex fraction, we just do the division. So let's see, what's that going to look like? We want to work out 2.5 divided by 5 1/3. Do you remember, is this going to be more or less than 1? Right, this is going to be less than 1 because the divisor is bigger. What should my first move be? In order to do any multiplication or division to mixed numbers, I need to make them into improper fractions. So I'm going to say 2.5. That's going to, well, it's going to be some number of halves. How many? Well, 2 whole things. Each one gets cut into 2 equal parts. And then I add in the half that I started with. So I get 5 halves. 5 1/3, that's going to be some number of thirds. How many? Well, 5 whole things. Each gets cut into 3 equal parts. Add in the one that I started with, and I get 16 thirds. So my problem becomes 5 halves divided by 16 thirds. How do I do fraction division now? Right, I have to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. First fraction stays the same. Second fraction, I take the reciprocal. And now I'm multiplying fractions, so I multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 16, I might want to write down off to the side. I think I get 32. So that tells me that the complex fraction, 2.5 over 5 1/3, is equal to the ordinary fraction, 15/32. And again, how did I do that? I understood the main fraction bar as division. And of course, it's really important which is the main fraction bar. Why is it important to make sure we know which one is the main fraction bar? Well, let's see an example. Let's compare 2/3 over 4 versus 2 over 3/4. And parentheses can help make it clear that this 2/3 is a number in the numerator. This 3/4 is a number in the denominator. What happens when we simplify this first one? Well, we'll have 2/3 divided by 4, of course, is 4 wholes, right? So we have 2/3 times 1/4. And we can say that that's 2/12, which I see a common factor of 2 here. This is 1/6. On the other hand, this complex fraction we'll understand as 2 divided by 3/4. That is, right, 2 is 2 wholes. And we'll write that as multiplication by, instead of 3/4, 4/3. So that's 8/3. 1/6 versus 8/3, completely different, right? So it's really important to keep track of which is the main fraction bar. I recommend using lines on the paper to help you keep track of this. And also just write the main fraction bar really big. As you're working through a problem, you can write it just hugely, cartoonishly big, just so you can tell which is which. because you don't want to get them crossed. So, okay, let me give you an example to try simplifying. And only simplify it to the point of being an ordinary fraction. You don't need to get it into lowest terms if you don't want to. Simplify 5/7 over 2½ Pause the video and try this now. All right, again, we're going to understand this main fraction bar as division. And now, in order to do this division, I need to make 2½ into an improper fraction. 2½? Well, that's going to be some number of halves. How many? 2 whole things. Each one is cut into 2 equal parts. Add in the half that we started with. So this is 5 halves. My original problem becomes 5/7 divided by 5 halves. Now we can rewrite this as multiplication. We have 5/7 times 2/5. And now, if you chose to multiply these just straight across, you might get 10/35. Or maybe you noticed that in fact we have 5 times 2 over 7 times 5, and the common factor of 5 cancels, leaving us with the fraction 2/7.